everyone. This is JP.
And this is Julie.
And Book of Hours podcast. Today we're featuring Lynne Taylor, also known as the Common Core Diva. Lynne is an activist and content creator focusing on education, going up against the Common Core in the past, and now, with the Great Reset and all the things that we talk about, as well as others out there in terms of how education is going to change and modify our lives in the future and our children's lives in the future especially. Hi, Lynne. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine this morning. I hope you all are.
Thanks. We're good.
Yeah.
Good. Very good.
So we were talking earlier, like your core focus is on education, and it has been for what? How many years now?
Oh gosh, going on to 15 years. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's quite a long time to focus on a particular thing. So you're definitely an activist.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I have a big mouth and I'm not afraid to use it.
Tell us a little bit about your latest work, your latest piece, your website.
Okay. Well, my website is commoncorediva.com. You can also find me on several different social media platforms like MeWe and Twitter and USA.life. I'm also involved with a wonderful group that if your followers have not learned about, it's called localactivist.org. It's part of the Citizens for Free Speech. And that's tied in with Patrick Wood, Tom DeWeese, those guys. And they are wonderful about raising the awareness about this technocracy that we're seeing that has cropped up in a lot of what you guys are uncovering and sharing, and then of course what I am also uncovering and sharing.
Good.
Yeah,
excellent.
Good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're familiar with Patrick Wood.
Yes.
And all the work he's done as well. So you're part of that group. That's good.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. Yeah. So if you want to really get active, that's a great way to do it and a great group to join.
Okay,
Right.
Well, that's definitely important especially for our viewers out there.
Yes.
Who often will ask us, what can I do?
Where can I go?
Oh my gosh. Well, I tell you, there is a wonderful lady by the name of Mary Baker, and she's from California, and she has written a book called The Citizen Ninja, and it's all about how to use proven techniques to get loud and local as well as respectful in your local areas. And I'm going to tell you, it helps tremendously.
Well, that's a good
resource.
A good resource.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's Mary Baker.
Mary Baker. Mm-hmm. And I think you can find the book on I found it on Thrift Books. I mean, you can get it through Amazon, but I try not to support them as much as possible.
Yeah. What are, if you were to, since your focus is education.
Right.
If you were to speak to a group of young mothers who have never before heard of any of these terminologies, like impact and all of the ways that their children are being changed, how would you speak to them if you were speaking to somebody who just thinks, well, I'm putting my kid in school and I'm doing the right thing?
Yeah, that's what we've always done. This is how it's done. Well, it's time to break the mold. I mean, things are getting reshaped and it's a choice. Do you want to have a way to be in control of how your child is educated and shaped, or do you want to just hand that child over to a monster who will put it in their image? That would be the best way that I could do it, because, this is a monster of a system and it seeks to destroy from within as well as outside. So we're seeing this happen not only in what's taught, but in the environments that it's taught. We're not seeing that parents are being involved. We're seeing that parents are being excluded, and then it's becoming a government nanny state, not a family-led, hey, let's educate Johnny and Susie.
Right.
Well, and it's certainly not in the way that we were raised in school.
Right.
And
completely different.
I mean, things were changing when I was in grade school, but nothing. It was the beginnings of all that, right?
Exactly. Yes, and I experienced some of that too. I mean, I remember going through public school, and when new math was rolled out, it was like, oh no. this is another way to do math. Well, that was a precursor to what we saw come in with Common Core. The
Right.
only difference is, while mom and dad couldn't really help with that new math back then, the parents, when the Common Core math came along, totally just gave up and said, you know what, I can't do it. I'm dumb. Let's let the school do it. And that was a psychological move by this system, what I call the Common Core machine, which is what I fight against. This was part of the mindset behind it, was to separate the child from the family on purpose.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it.
Wow. Yeah.
How did you get starred?
How did I get started?
What made you suddenly focus on education?
Okay, well, let's see here. Way back when my children were little, I was looking at what was going on in education, okay? And it was just like, I'm not a big religious person, as in, I'm out here, with posters and everything like that. But I do have a deep reverence for the Lord. And I know that the children that he gave me are a gift. And so it was like he was leading me to, I want you to look at homeschooling. Now, remember, I had not done anything but public school. I had not even, had getting married and having kids on my mind. And so here it was. It's like homeschooling. I've never heard of that. Have no clue what it was. So I took a long time to investigate what homeschooling is. I still wasn't convinced that I could do it, but it was very key to the people who were being put in my path to help encourage me and show me, yes, you can do it. Even if you don't have a full 4-year college teaching degree, you can successfully teach at home. And you can teach wonderfully, and you can teach above grade level, and you can do all these things that everyone in the system have told you that you could never do. Yes, you can. So fast forward 23 years later, I've now retired, but it was as the girls were getting up in high school that I really got to looking at was what in the future for higher education, because I know some of them wanted to go into higher education, some of them didn't, and that's okay. But being in a leadership position in the homeschool community, I was able to go to support group meetings, and it was there that I found homeschool magazines with articles about global education and the UN influence over homeschooling and all the curriculum shifts and all these other things that were going on. And one was written by Tom DeWeese, another by Kathy Duffy. And it was like, okay, I cannot have this information and sit on it, because not only are my children going to be impacted, but everyone I knew at that point, their child was going to be impacted. And the whole goal in those articles was, watch out, it's coming. It may not be in your face yet, but it's on the way, and your child will be just as dumbed down as the public school. And here we are all these years later. That's about that 15 years difference. Here we are, and it's happened. And I cannot tell you the number of homeschoolers who have laughed at me, scoffed at me, made fun of me, said there's no way this is going to touch us. And to this day will tell you, I homeschool, therefore I am immune. No, you're not.
Got it. Wow.
Well, one of the things that we wanted to emphasize in our lifelong learning video, as well as another one, is talking about how it doesn't matter if you homeschool, send kids to private school, Catholic school, doesn't matter.
Right.
They're going to be affected by the future of, having to collect badges and the, I did this education program.
Right. Yeah, it's mastery based. Yeah.
Yeah. And experience through, just fulfilling a basically an order. And we often compare it to kids actually being basically corporate reports. Basically, they are employees of a large corporation now, and they learn through their assignments.
Right.
And those assignments are very much like what an employee in a corporation would have to do.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all about the hard skills, which is what I can do with my hands, and the soft skills, which is what am I going to do with my brain. Now, while we've had those kinds of skills woven into our education that we experienced and those before us, it's shifted into, instead of how to think, or what is out there for me to do. It's this is what you will think and this is what you will do. So your freedoms have been eroded so exponentially in this system. It's just egregious.
It really is. And what's even more egregious is that there are parents out there where you tell them this, and they actually will look at it and say, well, you know, the world is changing. The world is turning very more towards tech, and I want my child to be a part of that world. And they just go right along with it. And, you know, their child is on the tablet 8 hours a day, having, you know, behavioral issues now that have never been presented before. We've got, like, you know, 8-year-olds still wetting the bed because they're not having proper social interaction. Language skills are dropping. I mean, we've got a serious problem happening to the next generation right now, with, you know, all in the name of, but we want them to be prepared for technology of the future.
Yeah, it was called college and career ready, and then somewhere along the way they added life ready. And again, it's being steeped in what this systematic dumbing down wants, not what Johnny or Susie wants, not what Johnny or Susie's parents want. And what we've seen, especially through my research, is not just K through 12 education. This is meant for adults. This is meant for people like you and I, who were well up in years, we're well established, but no, we have to be reskilled as well, because we all have to be some sort of cog in someone else's wheel.
Right, exactly. And I think what you just said there really transitions well into this idea that the whole world has to, all the small business infrastructure has to go away, and we all have to be those cogs in that wheel now.
Absolutely. Yes. So the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, while that was sold as the greatest thing since sliced bread, it is one of the most under the radar assaults on America that I have ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
Because it puts international committees over every aspect of our life, and it usurps our Constitution. It usurps the true way that our government was supposed to work, which was for we the people, and replaced it with we the corporation.
Right. Well, it's like the interstate compacts that we talked about.
Exactly.
You know? And so this global governance from, you know, local, where mayors now are more important than governors. Okay.
Yes.
Local, regional, where you have a multi-state compact, to then global governance, and it skips the national level altogether. And so, you know, we'll see an erasure of national borders and more of a coalescence of regions.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, make no mistake, the number of small businesses that have already closed, especially due to COVID, are part of that agreement, because the government gets to decide which companies flourish and which ones don't. Same with your family, same with your neighborhood. It's which ones are the haves, which ones are the have-nots. So that case system that we've seen set up in other regimes throughout history and fail miserably, that's what's being inserted here. And education was chosen as the main entry point to do all this, because if you attack what they believe and learn, you can change everything.
Right. Exactly. It starts with education. Absolutely. We can see it really clearly.
And it's, you know, it's not only an attack on, well, it's an attack on everything, you know, on life, but, you know, the attack on the arts. We see this over and over again, Julie and I, especially coming from, you know, a position of being as artists. We see this clearly.
Yeah.
And we see it in all aspects, not only from taking that aspect of education out of the curriculum, you know, where, you know, children can express themselves in a way that they, you know, they see fit, or that they're best suited for, right? But not only that, but also in how arts are treated, to how they're displayed, you know, and we're talking galleries and museums, you know, and so galleries can't really have the same kinds of functions that they used to.
Right.
because of social distancing and
Right.
and all this other stuff. So, they have artist talks on Zoom
Yeah.
instead of, and then even in museums, and Julie and I have been talking about an exhibit that's been coming, that came through. And, we're sort of like discussing it because I'm like
He's really against it.
I really have a hard time with it.
I want to go.
It's a Van
Is it
Gogh.
the virtual Van Gogh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming to Charlotte. And people are all they're just all a Twitter over it. And I'm like, if I want to go see Van Gogh, I want to see the actual picture. I don't want a giant visual blow up of it where I can walk through. I mean, why?
Right. So this is something called hyperrealism, right?
Right.
So it's the hyperreal, and it's a simulacrum of the experience of looking at a Van Gogh painting,
Mm-hmm.
which I have seen up close in exhibits.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them in Europe, where the Van Gogh Museum, but I've seen traveling exhibits, and there's nothing like it.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes,
And
precisely.
a photo, and even a high resolution screen image is just not going to do it for you. And then when it's like over top of you and it's on the walls, and it's not the same. And I know you.
I know. I want to see it. I want to go.
Well, I will admit, Julie, it is a bit interesting, but it's my beef with it is we're mimicking reality.
Right.
And someone else is profiting off of that.
Right.
That is exactly right.
Things are so economically tight for so many people. Yeah, the tickets are $50, $60. That might be a tank of gas. It might be part of your grocery money. It might be something. And we're having now to see, instead of having things like the museums open for free where you can go in, or maybe a $10 ticket to go see the real art exhibit, we're having inflated prices. Yes, we're having some concerts, but again, smaller seating, inflated prices. So this is where we're really going to see people have to really start choosing, hey, do I really want to eat, or do I really want to go to this exhibit?
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to go and do as we see fit, because we are upwardly mobile, we are incredibly smart, we know how to think our way out of a paper bag, but you have this entire system that's telling you, oh no, we're going to give you a plastic bag to get out of. Oh no, you can't use plastic because it'll harm the environment. No, we're going to go back over here and we'll use another kind of bag, and then we're going to just stuff you in it, and what you get is what you get.
Right.
Well, we've been talking about this a lot in terms of class war.
That's class war.
Yeah, it is.
War on the class.
And Julie, early on with this COVID lockdowns,
first thing I said.
That was one of the first things she said. And we did a video where we were in a forested area of Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a video where we were sitting in there and talking to people. But we had walked by what's it called? It's not an arboretum. It's
the Conservatory of Flowers.
So it's like it's a big Victorian conservatory.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's bigger than the one in San Francisco, which is also a Victorian jewel. They're very beautiful.
They're stunning.
Yeah, they really are. And we had gone in this one for an exhibit in there, but it was closed. After the lockdown because of COVID, and we cove down. Anyway, we were walking by it, and Julie's like, in the future, when all this starts, opening up again, it's basically going to be set up so that only private parties or only people with a lot of money will be able to go and experience this, in the future.
Right.
And this is what is taking place.
And sure enough, that Conservatory of Flowers, which you can walk through, it takes about an hour to walk through these beautiful displays of flowers, and there's different rooms you can go in, and different themes, tropical themes, different flowers and plants all over the world. It's all online. You can buy a ticket and you can watch it virtually on your screen. But if you want to go in, it has to be a very small window of time. They only allow a very few amount of people in, so you have to sign up quickly. It's much more expensive. It's class war.
And this,
Yeah.
is what
Class war.
this is what they're doing with museums as well.
Right.
Well, you know, it's shifting over into who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. I mean, we're
Right.
starting to see that pop up. So we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And we know that it's not only going to go after our kids or us, it's going to go after our properties. It's going to go after our homes. It's going to go after our jobs, because we all have to be, and I don't want to repeat myself, but I will, and that is that cog for someone else. So your joy, your happiness, what brings you peace, whatever, you know, you are interested in, will not be near as important, because as part of that collective, you as a person don't matter. What you can contribute will matter, but you yourself don't.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we saw this happening in San Francisco before we moved away.
Right. This attitude.
Several
Yeah.
years. And it was
years,
things like
yeah.
the common space started getting eroded. Right.
Yeah.
And it was subtle things at first, like, you know, the Google buses. I don't know if you ever heard of those. They're these gigantic buses that take the Google employees from San Francisco down to Silicon Valley. And what was happening was they were allowed to start using the bus lanes, the city bus lanes, and stop. And what would happen is you'd be waiting for a bus, a Google bus would show up, and then they're as tall as a 2-story building, practically, you know.
Yeah.
And you'd get hidden behind the thing while you're waiting for your bus, and your bus would go around you because it couldn't see that people were waiting at the bus stop.
Right. It's just horrible.
And
like, you know, and that's another indication of class war. You know, all of these Google employees ride this monolith to their office park. Okay, which looks like a college campus, where they have catered meals. They play, you know, all sorts of games during their breaks. Sometimes they can sleep over there. It's, you know, it's not like your typical office situation where you go in, clock in, sit at your desk for 8 hours and leave. These campuses, like the Facebook campus, the Google campus, you know, the YouTube campus, like, you know, LinkedIn campus, all these, they're state of the art. So they have these state of the art buses picking up these employees who live in their posh, you know, beautiful Victorians in San Francisco, taking these buses. These buses had coffee carts, Wi-Fi access, control, you know, temperature controlled. They were awful. So I said I made a comment on the Department of Transportation's website, and I said, look, why don't you have these buses meet in one place, and then all of these privileged, well-off, you know, coders and employees of Facebook and Google and all these places, they can ride their, you know, $5,000 bikes over to the Google bus. That way the Google bus doesn't have to try to maneuver in these really narrow streets in San Francisco where the muni buses, which are the public buses, which is what I had to take every day, would get in the way. And they were like, well, that would just make too much sense.
Yeah. Well, a lot of this doesn't make sense. And one of the things, as being an education researcher, that I have found is that it very much marries up not only with politics, but it marries up with your local governments. And so as becoming more vocal against our local government, because it is very corrupt, and it has actually made the news of that. Wow. And that's a whole nother topic. But the point of it is, when you start looking, when you know how to look at legislative bills and budgets and things like that, looking at your city budget is not that much of a far stretch. I would encourage your listeners, your followers, to start, if they haven't, start looking at line by line city budgets, because it's where the details are hiding of this agenda that we're talking about is really starting to become not just hidden, but in our faces. And what I mean by that is, I found in our city budget, the plans, I think it was the federal grant that was given to our town. It skipped the state level and came directly to the local level. So that's another way to look at it. But it was a grant, and the grant is, I can't remember how many millions of dollars, but its sole goal is to remove as many gas-powered cars off our streets as possible, because we have to think of the future, and we have to be more green, and we have to be this and we have to be that. And I'm thinking, okay, what do you do for the senior citizen, or you do for the family where that transportation is their way to get to their work?
Right.
What if they don't have a city bus system? What if they don't have all these other things, but that car is how they get to and fro? If you remove that, then you remove their livelihood. If they can't have, and this is how it goes back to education, because if you don't have the right credentials, you cannot get a job. If you cannot get a job, you cannot feed your family, pay your bills, or do anything else. But yet the government will find ways to subsidize you to death. Seriously, they will. So, looking at the city budget led me to that initiative, which led me to here's our master plan for our community. And it was in that master plan, and it's in a nice red shiny binder, you guys. It really is. Yeah. And I have marked all the pages where it will impact negatively my neighborhood. And what I mean by negatively is it will come in and start to widen roads that technically are city, but also carry a state highway number. So therefore, you've got a mix of city and state now against the citizen, as opposed to one of them against you. You also have public-private partnerships, which we know are totally fascist, that have come in and said, oh, well, if you're too poor to pay for this, guess what? You let me build this master community over here, which is a hub, which will be a city among itself, and you guys know all this. Mm-hmm. And we'll help widen your road. We'll help pay this bill. Sure. Now, that's bad governing in the fact of the city collects taxes for infrastructure. We don't need a public-private partnership coming in going, okay, to grease Johnny's wheel, I'm going to let him do this, and to pave Susie's road, they're going to be able to do this. But that's exactly what's happened. And so my house is the oldest one on my block, okay? It's almost 100 years old. So it's been around a very, very long time. Next year, 2022, my house will turn 100 years old. So that means in 1922, before any of us were ever even thought of, this house was here. It was part of a farm. It's why I still have what's known as a large lot. It's 3/4 of an acre. Now, in a almost downtown area, you don't get lots that large. Right. What do you think is going to happen to the lot? Tiny houses. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the front yard is going to be removed to widen this road. Okay, because traffic is such a bear. I can tell you by sitting out on my front porch, there are certain times of the day that traffic is heavy, but it's never to the point of we need to start removing people's yards. And when I say my yard, I mean not just mine, but I have several neighbors. We are private homeowners. Mm-hmm. Our homes are all we have. We are not like the landlords who have houses on this block, who have multiple properties they can fall back on for income. Sure. Our homes don't bring us income, but they afford us a place to shelter so that we can earn an income. Mm-hmm. And we're talking houses, like I said, 1922, 1928, mid-50s. We're talking 1930s. So we've got a nice mix of all kinds of individual homes that now will have to sacrifice parts of their property for this road widening. Now, the road widening is going to afford a turn lane, a bike lane, and a pedestrian lane. We don't have a tremendous amount of pedestrian or bike traffic on my particular block because it's so close to downtown. Most people walk. So why are we building these lanes that are not going to be used, especially if we're trying to use this government money to get all the gas-powered cars off the highway? It's because it's going to be run by the city transportation, regional transportation. You know, we're seeing it start up. Okay. Yeah. So you also look at the master plan. My individual house is not going to matter because it doesn't look like everyone else's house. So we have gentrification now coming in. Mm-hmm. We also see that this will devalue the property enough that I might not can sell it. And if I can't sell it, how am I going to go live somewhere else? The houses they're replacing with which will come in phase 2, because we're approaching phase 1, which is to start off with this bike lane, pedestrian lane, and turn lane. By the time phase 2 comes in, it will be a 4-lane highway, so my house will cease to exist.
Oh my God.
So it'll be like an interest.
Yeah, this is what we're facing.
Yeah.
Oh. What's the timeline on that?
No one will tell us. See, that's the one question we've asked throughout this process, and we're 2 years into this process, by the way, which started with my husband and I going to a city meeting because there was some talk of some rezoning. And what we've seen is a city government official lie to our faces that there's no way this master plan would ever harm our neighborhood because it's considered somewhat historic, to it's very definitely going to not only take part of your front yard, but the city is now saying, well, here's our final offer for what we're going to pay you to do this. And it's a fraction of what my property and my house is worth, but they're going to be able to do it. The contracts that surround this, we want looked over because it gives the public-private partnership aspect an open window as to when they can come back and do whatever the bloody heck they want.
Right.
When it should be, when the project's over, the project's over. You can't come back and do what else. So, this is what we're seeing happen. And this is just in one place, in what I call Podunkie, North Carolina. I have understood, since I have started sharing this on social media, that we have others from across the nation who are saying, hey, we're seeing it happen here. We're seeing it happen here. You guys are telling us it's starting in small ways. And yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So we know it's an uphill battle. We know more than likely we will lose, but we want people to know what's going on so that they can start to see what's going on in their neighborhood. So if they have a chance to get ahead of this, they absolutely can.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because it flies in the face, even though these are like sustainable development goals that you're describing. It flies in the face of those goals, as well as like the initiatives that you were describing earlier about getting cars off the road, especially gasoline cars, right?
Right.
And what we're seeing in San Francisco, and maybe parts of Pittsburgh too, although there's just not as much funding for Pittsburgh.
No.
Because they put their money in other industries and they don't worry about this. But what we're seeing in San Francisco is what they call slow streets initiatives. And what that is actually closing streets off to car traffic or minimizing the traffic on the street, and allowing, not just to put in bike lanes, but to basically allow for pedestrians and cyclists to use that. Now, I am a cyclist, and I am like happy that there is more attention being paid to this. I ride my bike to work, but I don't have the infrastructure that they have there.
No.
But what I'm getting at is on the other hand, what we're seeing is these are initiatives to create an environment for better surveillance of people who are basically walking and taking bikes, and they've actually closed certain streets. Like they closed a highway that goes along the beach front, Ocean Beach in San Francisco, and they've closed it off and on over the years for weather or whatever, but it's now closed pretty much permanently, and COVID was the reason that they gave for closing it, and it's now turning into bike infrastructure. And they also did that they closed down the roads completely in Golden Gate Park, which is several miles long from the city into where the ocean is, right? And so only cyclists and pedestrians have access, within the park now, and cars are not allowed in there. And so they're doing this all over the city, and it's part of these goals, these sustainability goals,
right?
But there's other things that are going on there, right? It's not. They do these in the name of being green. Right. But really, it's a cover for what else is going on.
Oh, absolutely it is.
Yeah. One thing that you said that really grabbed my attention was you live within walking distance to downtown Charlotte? Is that?
Oh, downtown Mooresville. See, I live in what's considered a bedroom community of Charlotte, and before all this is done, we will actually be part of Charlotte because that's part of the master plan as well. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I do live within walking distance of downtown. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you live within walking distance of downtown, and the people that live there, they just leave their house and go walk downtown on a nice day.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this idea of putting in bike lanes is like, it's kind of like this idea of rolling out COVID tests or rolling out vaccines. You just do it to market off of a budget plan. Mm-hmm. You market, or you know what I'm saying? Like, you check it off of,
like the impact investments.
It's not really about green infrastructure. It's more like, we can give you this chunk of funding as long as you have these PCR tests, or as long as you have these vaccines, or as long as you put in this bike lane. It doesn't really matter if the bike lane is actually ever used.
Exactly.
Or if anyone takes the PCR test, or takes the vaccine, or builds the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. It's just that it's there for someone to have a job, just to have a job. Like, we witnessed right outside our front door, literally right outside our front door, the street being torn up and then put back for no reason. Like,
it's arbitrary.
And they put it back so that they could justify their budget, so that those guys could get overtime because it was around the holidays.
It was the excuse was that it was a gas leak, or
they had an excuse, but
it's busy work.
Right,
it's busy work. So that's what the bike lane is. You don't need a bike lane.
No, we don't. We really don't. I mean,
distance to your downtown area.
Right.
Now we're cyclists and we love bike lanes. Anytime we see like the green pathway, nice smooth green path, as cyclists, we love it, because in Pittsburgh it's called Pothole City for a reason.
Mm.
There are no smooth, really great bike lanes.
Right.
But
again, it's coming back to the impact investments, where they,
and let me just say, I'm not against good, responsible road widening projects or bike lanes or any of those things, because we can happily, share the road or all that kind of stuff. But it's the method by which all this is happening that's the issue that folks need to really focus on. It's not what's coming to fruition, it's how it's coming and how it is attacking their liberties and their freedoms.
It really truly is. And also, your house. Right. And your right to property. Your home.
It's also the reason for doing it, right? They give you one reason, but it's really for other reasons. It's for making money. It's not about greening your infrastructure. It's not about money. It's about making money. It's funny, I just went back and started reading this book. It's called Anarchy in Action by Alan Ward. Mm-hmm. And he was an architect.
In the UK,
as well as an educator. But there's a chapter in there about planning, about city planning, and how detrimental it ultimately is to communities, and how it's all about really about money and control more than it is about anything else. It doesn't help anybody. And he was a post. He's the World War II generation, so he's no longer with us. But this book was written about 1972.
Okay.
And again, there it is. And he was talking about how post-war in England, the whole country was what he called the phrase was "raise and rise," and it was
my gosh, yes,
what they were doing, like basically World War II damage.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they had to bring up rubble and everything, but it was all about raise and rise and tearing down buildings that weren't even damaged in the war, so that they could build something new. But in a lot of cases, he was talking about Liverpool, where they would just like clear out vast areas, and then they wouldn't do anything with it.
Right.
But they would plant grass to keep the Roma out.
Right.
And it was, it was.
That's like Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh does that.
So it's pretty remarkable how this playbook just keeps repeating itself. And I guess that's why I wanted to bring it up, because looking at this document, this historical document, him documenting what took place, in the years prior to him writing the book and his direct experience of it,
Right.
talking about it from the perspective of, this is designed to take away your autonomy, designed to hurt you and your personal property, and designed to make money for the investor class.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so reading this, I was like, well, this is like right now. From a different perspective. Back then, it was like, oh, this is for modernization. Well, now it's for greening.
Right.
Well, and again, it ties back to those goals you were talking about. It absolutely does, because all 17 are woven throughout not only education, but through our communities. And this is how I was seeing it rear its ugly head, even in our city budget. You also want to, if you can, whether it's virtual or in person, get to those city meetings, because it was one that was towards the end of 2020 that I went to, where the city, in the name of technology, decided, okay, we need to streamline redistricting or rezoning citywide.
Sure.
That was one of the biggest things to scream at you. Okay, they just streamlined how to rezone.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can do it on one side of town, they can do it on the other. Right. Now, it was supposed to be to save resources and technology and, and stop redundancy and, all this other kind of stuff. But it was like when they passed that, which, passed, I think, unopposed, it was like I was just sitting there going, holy cow, do you see what they just did?
Exactly.
And made it citywide. It was so that any of the rezoning or redistricting that we may not want, that process just totally changed to put them in charge, not we the people.
Right. So, and that's the thing about these. So what you said right there is really important. A lot of people in this community of ours who are researching sustainable development goals and are watching it play out in real time in our lives, like you losing your house. A lot of people are focusing on like the big picture, like, oh, it's the United Nations. Oh, it's Bill Gates. Oh, it's Klaus Schwab. Oh, it's all these people that are way up here that you will never be able to touch. You will never be able to influence their group, but you can influence. You can walk down to your local municipal meeting that happens once a month, and you can get on the record, and you can vocalize and you can voice your opinion about these initiatives that are in place, which are often corporate reports. You didn't vote on them.
Right.
You didn't have a say in them. You never got a notice in the mail that said this, what you just talked about, the rezoning, this zoning project is up for vote in the next ballot initiative or whatever. So that's not democracy. That's fascism.
Absolutely.
When you don't have a say in how your own district is zoned. I mean, and so a lot of people are going from their home all the way up to the United Nations. They're going from their home to Davos. And I'm like, there's a community right there in front of you that you can really make a change in.
Yeah. And I've made such a stink at everyone that I have been to or submitted comments virtually to. They know who I am. And they know I will call them out on what is going on. And here's what gets me is one of the last times we were able to gather in a group that wasn't social distanced and all this other kind of stuff at this city meeting. I was speaking against one of the altruistic plans they had. And, I only get 3 minutes, but I was going to make those 3 minutes count. And, I got through everything and I was able to, look at them and with a straight face and not scream at them. But, I got through, and it wasn't till after the meeting that this entire group of about 60 people who were fighting something else that was going on came out and, oh, you said it, oh, blah, 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 blah. They high-fived me. They did everything. And I'm like, come talk to me. Let's get involved. And they went on because their little piece of the puzzle had been addressed.
Right.
And rather than us getting in more conversation and being able to say, okay, well, on your side of town, you're seeing this, here's what I'm seeing, instead of getting that group of like-minded people to really get behind me, they left. And so my point is, we've got to find like-minded people to attend these meetings with us, because if we don't, not only, I mean, your voice is going to be heard, but you're easier to pick off. You're easier to marginalize. And I've had my mayor do that. He was so condescending and patronizing to me after one meeting because he thought I didn't know my bottom from a hole in the ground. And I do. And he decided he was going to school me on how city government works. And this is the same government that is now being reported on doing funny things with money that they confiscated. So, you know, who's more right? Yeah, it's not about who's right. It's about your government doing what it's supposed to do. And when it's not, it is our duty to call it out, which I have consistently done. But we've got to have more people calling their local governments out.
Right. And I think starting with, you know, getting a copy of where your local municipality, your local city, your local government, your local neighborhood, where the money goes. Like, what is your budget? What is your yearly, your annual, your quarterly budget for this area and where it goes?
All those line items,
Absolutely. That's it. They hide in those line by line items. And as far as the greening and the SDGs and all those are hidden within multiple projects that don't necessarily have a name that screams green or SDG, it's there.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, the master plan for Mooresville is called Mooresville 1. The plan for Winston-Salem is Winston-Salem 2030. Charlotte is part of the, they are in a global mayoral group that I've researched. And so Charlotte's gone. I mean, Charlotte is gone.
All the big cities are gone.
Oh, yeah. They are.
Big cities have
and you know, like what we're
gone.
You know, so you mentioned the mayors, and we talked about this earlier. You know, the mayors now are getting more power than the governors of each state.
Right.
So the big city mayors are having, you know, a lot of influence, and you know, Peduto here in Pittsburgh, but especially our former mayor in San Francisco, London Breed, has a huge amount of influence.
Oh my God!
And you know, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, was the mayor of San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
We have a feeling he is playing for, you know, leadership roles in
a global,
you know, in a regional setting that will be part of the global governance that we were talking about before.
Okay. Wow. Oh my goodness.
Mayors actually have more power than governors. So what's been trending lately on social media, and then it's been about an hour, so we'll wrap this up. But soon. But what's been trending on social media lately is governors are now signing mandates that say, we're open. You don't have to wear a mask. You don't have to do anything. Go back to normal. Life can resume. And everybody's all excited and talking about it. It happened in Texas. It happened yesterday in Arizona. Obviously, Florida, it's, you know, they never really closed. South Dakota never really closed, right? But if you talk to the individuals that live in certain communities within that state, they're like, no, I can't go and eat at certain restaurants anymore.
Right.
They're still mandating the mask, or they're requiring the social distance, and I won't participate in that. So the governors are out there bloviating and making these gestures to seem like it's free. But it's really the mayors and the local community leaders and the business owners that are...
You're right.
You know?
You're right. But before we close, I want to bring up one thing that I learned through the Citizens for Free Speech. Back in 2019, was able to go to Phoenix and meet Patrick in person, and got to meet Tom DeWeese in person. And Tom's been one of my heroes for a long time. But it was one of the presentations that Tom did that really, really opened my eyes. And I want to share that so that it can open others' eyes, because I think that's what is important about our conversation, is that we're using this to help arm people with that information that they need to go to their local areas. And what it was Tom got us, and he said, okay, he had pieces of paper with different city roles on it, so one was mayor, one was city clerk, so on and so forth. And so, we're standing up there with our little signs showing what our role in government is. And then the rest of everyone were those NGOs, or their non-government associations or organizations. And what he told us was that you could campaign on the most citizen-friendly platform known to mankind. The second you get elected, these NGOs come and swarm you, and that's when he had the whole rest of the group come up and swarm those of us who had, city roles. They surrounded us. We had nowhere else to go. And he says what they do is they offer paid vacations or trainings, because you have a new person who's now come on the city. They have to walk and talk like the city. They have to think like the city. And so all these agenda items that are out there in those non-government groups now have permeated your city government, to the point of your city government no longer reflects the citizen platform on which you ran, but you're reflecting totally the corporate agenda that has been offered to you. And if you don't vote along a certain way, you are ostracized. If you don't this, you're that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's an organization out of San Francisco. I was actually years ago getting a manicure, and a woman came up to me and said, have you ever heard of Emerge California? You should be a part of it. And they groomed the current mayor of San Francisco. They groom these.
They groomed Kamala Harris.
They groomed Kamala Harris. She comes out of this organization.
Oh, yeah.
Train you on how to speak the language while you actually initiate policy for corporate backers.
Absolutely.
Corporations. So this is happening on a small scale and on a large scale. I'm glad to hear you say that, because it really it makes me feel good that there's somebody else out there that gets it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when the mayor is trying to school me on how city finance works, I know it's not what we the people want. It's what that group behind him wants.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, guys.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we touch on that a little bit in our Resilient Cities video.
Yeah.
The little cartoon that we did.
Yeah. But that's a whole other initiative.
Right.
Right.
It is.
That's brought about by the Rockefeller Foundation.
Right.
Oh yeah, Rockefeller has since removed their name from it, and some other group has taken over. But yeah, I did it from the educational end, and how the resilient cities are the model for the adverse childhood experiences, and how we have to erase every negative emotion, every negative impact out there known to man. And if you remove negativity, how can you associate or identify positivity? Right. There's a reason why Jesus had good emotions and bad emotions. It wasn't that one's better than the other. It's that you needed all of them to be a whole person. And so that's where that whole child's garbage comes in.
Wow.
A whole adult comes in.
It's always amazing to me how they frame it in positive and progressive language.
Right.
God.
And it is
so pernicious. It's beating out the human experience.
Right.
And human element.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
How to express yourself. We were talking about that earlier, how they're taking away expression from children.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it, there are going to be things in life that none of us ever want to happen, but it's part of how we're shaped. It's how we learn. There are consequences or reactions or things like that. I mean, if you had ever told me when I was a kid that one day I'd grow up and I'd get married and I'd lose a child, I would have told you, nah. I'll grow up and get married, but losing a kid, no, I'm not going to do that. But I did. But it was because of going through that I was able to learn, first of all, more about myself, more about my faith. I was also able to learn about all the others who'd gone through similar, and how we can be there for each other, and how you can take a loss that big and help use it to go and do other great things, which was one of the other reasons why I got into this activism, was because, you want the best for your kids. I want the best for your kids, and this garbage that we're seeing is so beneath them.
Oh my goodness, it really is.
Well, I think that's a good place.
That's a good place to
stop.
end
Yeah,
it.
to end it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. I've so enjoyed this. I tell you, there are times I get on interviews or chats or whatever, and it's like, I can't wait for this to be over. This was not one of them.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks.
And, if you ever need me for anything, I'm available. I'm a big fan. So, and I'm doing all I can and trying to get everything out there. So,
We appreciate that.
So
all right.
Yeah. So we've been talking to Lynne Taylor. We'll see you again next time.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Book of Hours are artists here to empower and embolden your response to the constant negative sound bites that attack your news and social media feeds. In order to continue making the video essays and art you've come to enjoy, we need your support. Make a one-time donation or become a patron. Thank you.